Hello and welcome to Network Insights from Move Consulting. This is our first episode of 2022 and we are delighted to be back. For those that are new to the series, Network Insights offers the opportunity for us to speak to the amazing people who make up our network and for them to share insights into their work to supporting people to be more physically active. Titled Including Everyone in Physical Activity, today's episode is going to focus on some of the inequalities that exist in relation to physical activity. So, it's without further ado, I hand over to Elaine to introduce today's guests.
Hello everyone, it's an absolute delight to have two people with us today. One is Jamie Hooper, who used to be part of the team and the health and wellbeing team at Swim England, so it's really good to see you again. And the second one is Gurmej Pawar. So it's brilliant to see you as well. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm just going to kick off with a general question, and that's really to understand a little bit about what your passion is and what your knowledge is and your understanding around this area. So it's really, I'm just going to leave it very open and yeah, just tell us a little bit about where you're coming from in terms of inequality.
Gurmej, do you want to
go? I'll let you go.
Okay, no worries. So I'm Jamie. I may be familiar to some people or not, but it's good to. I was going to say it's good to see people, but I'm not because we're recording this. But we'll maybe see some interaction once this goes out. But I've spent 10 years or so working in traditional sports sector around equality, diversity, inclusion. As Elaine said, I was at Swim England for 4 years in the kind of E&D health team in that space, working across what actually is really 5 individual sports, trying to drive inclusion across different areas. From that, I moved to work at Sport England for 2.5 years in the E&D team there, where I predominantly led on LGBTQ plus and ethnic diversity participation, but obviously with a team of 2 trying to change the world, we were involved in quite a lot of different stuff across the organisation, across the sector. I left Sport England just over a year ago and set up my own consultancy called Inclusive Cultures, which is all about going direct to the sector to support driving change around equality, diversity, inclusion. It's been an amazing first year, and a big part of that has been co-founding the Include Summit with Gurmej, which I'll let you speak a bit more about, Gurmej, and I'm sure we can explore that a little bit more. But lots of experience in this kind of space. Really pleased to be here and just to have a bit of a chat about what we think.
Brilliant, thank you. And Gurmej?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. I'm Gurmej Singh Pawar. I'm based in the West Midlands, and my sort of day-to-day occupation is that I run an events company. But in terms of my interactions with sport and how I got involved in sport, I mean, I've played sport since being a young kid. Every day I'm trying to keep myself active, but I'm also the chairman of a hockey club based in Birmingham's inner city called Barford Tigers Hockey Club. And we've got an amazing array of talent and young people from the inner city. We've got such a diverse group of players, and I guess I really got involved in the whole ED&I and sport topic because around August 2020 I wrote a letter alongside 8 other clubs to England Hockey just about the lack of diversity in hockey as a sport, and that letter got picked up quite widely in the media, in the Guardian, BBC and Sky. And then I was approached by quite a few people from around the country just saying, look, what can we do to help? And it was at that moment I realised that I couldn't just make a noise and then just wander off. I had to do something about it as well. And we put together a group called Hockey All In, which gained a lot of momentum over the last 12 months. We've been doing some fantastic webinars and really trying to get the hockey community educated and into more discussions about what is going on in the sport and getting more people from all backgrounds playing. And it was on this journey that I met Jamie, and we just had a discussion about the fact that there wasn't really anything that brought sports together as a whole. to discuss this topic, and we somehow came up with the idea of the Include Summit, which has now become like a monster, and it's just gained so much traction, and we're just so excited that we're putting it on in a couple of months, but a little bit scared at the same time.
Yeah, cheers to that.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant to hear. In relation to the experience that you'll have, Gurmej, from the work that you've done with your hockey club and that broader kind of response from just asking some of those challenging questions, there's probably loads that you can share to those that are watching this recording that will really have an impact. And often it's what we might overlook as the obvious, we might say, or the basic things that you can do, the low-hanging fruit to really make an impactful change. So some of the social media content that we've put out in the lead up to this one is around, well, what are some of those things that we can do to tackle the ED&I agenda, so equality, diversity and inclusion. And one of what might be overlooked as being too simple is showing that the narrative, or conveying the narrative, that physical activity is something that everyone can take part in. Everybody can be physically active. It's about finding a way they can do it for themselves. So to backpedal a little bit, there's loads of key terms that fly around. ED&I, there's 3 straight away. Is it all different things? Is it a different thing I need to do for each one? Jamie, if I can come to you, how do you understand all these key terms like inclusion, diversity, equality? Can you help us understand them a little bit better?
Yeah, I think you can put different distinct definitions on all of these kind of things, and then you can throw into the mix things like privilege, fragility, unconscious bias, all of this kind of stuff in that space, which you can make individual sciences. There'll be people doing individual PhDs on all of that kind of stuff in really minuscule, tiny areas across health as well, and physical activity generally, well, I guess, and more specifically. But I guess what, as a top kind of a level, I'd say equality is about equality of opportunity, ensuring that everyone has the ability to access what everyone else does, whether that's whatever that is, whatever the people want to do, that they're on an equal standing to be able to do that. Diversity is about celebrating people's individual differences, recognizing them, and I guess equity across both of those is the doing bit, is taking the recognition and understanding that in order to create more of that equal opportunity, you need to do something about that, and that's where kind of the equity bit sits in there. Inclusion then is kind of the all-encompassing, I guess, crescendo, where we want to be in that space where everyone is just kind of living their true selves, achieving whatever they want to do in the way that they want to do it, and that's so easy, I think, in a way, to get your head around with sport, because it's just about everybody being able to take part in a way that they want to. And I guess the main bit I'd say around this is that if you forget all of the sciencey stuff and just keep in your mind this is just about being nice to people, fundamentally at the heart of all this is not being a dick. And I say that quite a lot with organizations that I work with, is this hashtag don't be a dick. Like, just be a nice person, appreciate where somebody's coming from, try and get to know what support that they might need to achieve what they want to do, and help them to do it in the most fun way that you can.
You make it sound so simple. And I keep thinking, well, if it was that simple, we should all be it should all be happening. There wouldn't be a need for your summit. And so what are some of the barriers and the things and the challenges that prevent that from happening? I mean, obviously, you've got lots of experience around it from hockey, and that group, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when you started to sit down and discuss some of the challenges that are out there. What were the things that came forward in terms of that?
Yeah, I think just to break it down as simply as possible, just a lack of understanding of what's going on in inner city areas. I mean, hockey has become a very I'd say very much an upper class sport in many respects. If you look at the Great Britain team in the last Olympics, it was, I think, something like 80% were from private schools, and there wasn't one ethnic minority that represented Great Britain, and there hasn't been an ethnic minority that has represented Great Britain in hockey in a major tournament for around about 20 years now, which is quite shocking given the fact that in India, Pakistan, it's such a popular sport, and we've got such a rich, diverse country and heritage. I just feel that there's been sort of a missing link somewhere, and a lot of it's to do with access to facilities as well. You come to somewhere like Birmingham, you don't really get top facilities like you would, especially in the city of Birmingham, like you would in some of the southern counties. I think just the lack of understanding of the way that people play and how they understand the game. I think that the Great Britain, England hockey and Great Britain way of playing for the last few years has been very much based on what they saw as a Germanic model, and they kind of steered away from some of the Indian and Pakistani styles of hockey, but not understanding that some of the clubs aren't really promoting that, but they just had an image in their mind that if you're from that background, then that's how you must play. But going back to sort of the original point about how we break this down, I mean, Jamie's got a wealth of knowledge on this topic, a lot more than me. But when I look at it from a very, very simplistic point of view, and I think about what is it that we need to do to get more people into the top level of sport from all backgrounds, it simply starts with getting people moving, getting people physically active, getting people an understanding of what a healthy diet is. And there are so many people that aren't aware. And I was having this debate. My mum, she worked with the NHS since the age of 15, and you could never say anything about anything to do with the NHS or anything like that to my mum and not have a debate about it. And this is going towards a subject which is a little bit off piece, but around the whole topic of COVID and what we've been doing for the last 12, 18 months. The government have put a lot of money and time into vaccines. I'm somebody who's been vaccinated. I'm somebody who believes in the science of it. But I think that now the government have an opportunity. They've got people's attention, but you never hear them talking about get moving, look after your own health, boost your own immunity. This is a perfect opportunity to get that across to the country, explain to people what healthy living is. And I'll give you an example from a hockey camp that we put on at Barford Tigers in the summer. A young lad came there and his lunch was 4 chocolate muffins. And we could laugh about it a little bit, and we did have a little bit of a chuckle, but there's a serious point to that his parents, for whatever reason, thought that giving him 4 chocolate muffins for lunch would be a good idea. And it quite clearly isn't. And it makes you understand that people don't really get the whole point about healthy living in a lot of places around the country.
Yeah, it's really interesting you saying that, because that resonates quite a lot with, there are 2 themes that I heard from that. One is that key understanding of what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. Because I always remember speaking to some dietitians who designed a school intervention where you started with draw what you have on a plate, and some of the families went, well, we don't eat off plates, we eat on takeaway. So that applies equally in physical activity. Is like we've designed a world of physical activity for a certain group of people, and we don't understand often what it's like for other groups of people, and so nothing changes. So for me, there's something about trying to get to that level of understanding that's really, really important. Otherwise, whatever you create is just going to perpetuate what's already in place. So yeah.
And just keeping it simple, really.
I agree, Elaine, and we talk about and we use a lot in the work that we do at Move Consulting the COM-B model in relation to behaviour change. So for those that aren't aware, COM-B is an acronym, COM and B. So capability, opportunity and motivation drive our behaviour. And as you're mentioning, Gurmej, in relation to some of those enablers around being physically active, somebody's diet and nutrition, whether that be hydration or the food that they eat, that's part of the opportunity for them to be active, or it's part of certainly their capability to be active. Because if we're thinking about taking that concept of just nutrition broader, and it's somebody living with a long-term health condition, it might be that their medication takes away their ability to be active at certain parts in the day. Elaine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can recall conversations we've had previously around those living with dementia. Their medication might kick in after a certain time in a day. Obviously, depends on when you take your medication. But if that's not been early enough in the day, then it's one of those things that could seriously impact on it. And Jamie, you mentioned a big term around those biases that exist, whether unconscious or conscious. If we're thinking about things only in our own shoes, massively limits our ability to be able to empathise, as you say, Elaine, won't it?
Yeah, and I think that is the fundamental flaw in this sector, in every sector in this country, in the Western world, is that lack of representation. And that's the fundamental problem, in that white privileged people, white privileged men run the world, and that's the perception of how so many things are developed around, from like anything and everything you can think of will be coming from that perspective. And we see that so much, definitely in sport, and that it's really pronounced in terms of that difference between the kind of elite privilege that run the show versus those that are so far apart from even thinking about being active. I'll come back to that a little bit, but you just sparked something in my head around the COM-B model, because when I was at Sport England, we did the big race equality report. Was the biggest piece of work that had been done by Sport England around race equality in the sector. There was some COM-B analysis within that, and actually I'm pretty sure the main difference between white and non-white people was the self-belief to achieve in sport. That was the main difference, in that obviously white people feel like, of course I can do that, I'll just go on and get on with it, and that was the bit that was different for everyone else, which is just so obvious when you think about that representation and how that manifests in everything. And that, I think, that exactly that bit, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, is so hard to do if you don't have kind of all the intricate knowledge. But we have to do it that way at the moment because we don't have that representation. If we had genuinely diverse representative workforces, we would be able to make more informed, representative, inclusive decisions, because all of those opinions are around the table. And I think where the sector is at with some of this stuff now, people are recognizing that they don't have that representation, and then it's what they do next it's the kind of pivotal bit, whether they make the effort to go and find some of that, whether they recognize it and think that's enough to continue kind of doing the same narrative that they are doing, or whether they're not even like within the spectrum, they're just kind of continuing where they're going. And one of the things I think we can come on to unpick is a little bit about what happened with Yorkshire cricket and how that kind of played out, and some of that stuff recently. But I'm conscious of talking for a long time, so I'll pause because I'm sure someone wants to comment.
I think in relation to representation, I'll try to find the link and share it in the post below. There was some research that I can recall seeing around about probably 5 years ago now around the impact that role models play on particularly teen age. And don't quote me directly, but I'm fairly certain the female figure within a family unit had a greater impact on the family in relation to being physically active. And it wasn't the case that mum or whoever that figure was seen to be active, but it was their relationship with being physically active. So if they come through the door and it's kind of like, oh, I went on a run and I'm never doing that again, that wasn't any more or less impactful. But if they came in feeling good or smiling or with positive sounds around that experience, that had a real impact, more than the male figure did in the family. So it was a really interesting piece there. And I know it's not the same as representation across when we think about diversity, but those role models, coming back to the point you made earlier, Gurmej, around somebody turning up to a holiday camp with 4 muffins. That could be the social opportunity, that the culture within that family of that's what lunch is, and I don't need to feel worried or whatever it might be. So how we can influence those different things. It's not always about the practice of the coach or the deliverer on the ground. It's much broader, isn't it, where we can make those impacts. Are there any key bits that you would say? We mentioned low-hanging fruit before. When we think about designing programs or interventions that are real key fundamentals to achieving this more diverse and representative engagement. Big open question to either of you.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about what we try and do at the club, we spend a lot of time trying to have parent engagement, and we started just before COVID, about a year before, doing a parents appreciation evening at Barford Tigers Hockey Club, where we'd invite in a guest speaker, and we put on an evening, and we'd put on like some a buffet for the parents, and to bring the kids along, and it'd be a bit of a social as well, and we'd have somebody to come and talk about diet. We'd have somebody talking about how their kids can get into university, trying to get the message across that, it doesn't have to be either or, like in terms of it doesn't have to be education or sport, it could be both, and how powerful sport and getting moving is to helping you have having good success in your exams, having good success in your university career, and having a good opportunity to get a great job or run a business. And just things like that, really, just trying to get people engaged and thinking outside the box a little bit. What is the easiest way that we can get people into a room and get their attention on stuff like this? Because sometimes you think, and again, it's going back to what Jamie has said, that we have to have the humility to know that we don't understand everybody and not everybody understands us. And we have to have the humility to say that we need to learn from what they're thinking as well. Or as somebody, like I'm somebody who's been brought up around sport. As I said, my mum had worked in the NHS. I think I know what a good healthy diet is. And sometimes you have the perception in your own brain is like, well, how can somebody not understand? But sometimes people just don't know, and you don't know you don't know at the end of the day.
Well, and also I probably do know what a healthy diet is, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I stick to it.
I suspect the thinking was you're going to be running around, you'll need energy. Donuts, that's the answer.
Well, this is the flip side to sport, right? Is that I justify eating what I want on 2 hockey sessions a week, which is not good enough. I need to be doing more than that. Yeah, I mean, there's loads to unpick within that, isn't there? But yeah, I think that family bit is so key, and I definitely experienced that when I was working in swimming, and I would say probably particularly with more diverse families, that in this country swimming is maybe not as part of the kind of culture in the UK, which actually, as a side note, it is so fascinating because I've spoken to so many kind of people from ethnically diverse communities in the UK who say when they go back to kind of family roots to Pakistan, India, the Caribbean, Africa, everybody swims and they can't believe it, and yet here it's just not a part of the culture. I don't want to make this a swimming chat because me and Elaine could go on that for hours, but I find that fascinating because it just further demonstrates that the system in the UK is broken, and that won't be just about swimming, that will be around other things. But one of the things we saw a lot was where if we can get the kids interested in physical activity, actually they become the ones that bring their parents with them, that talk to grandparents about, I love this, can we go and have a go at this, can we go and do this? So sometimes it's not even about us convincing the parents, it can also be the other way around. But again, I think that comes back to knowing who you're talking to, what kind of community, and that will differ by location. I always come back to an example where we ran a project with 2 Muslim female groups in Batley in Yorkshire, 2 mosques like 200 meters apart, and they both wanted the sessions delivered totally differently, and at the time that was like a real eye-opener for me. But why should it be? Of course people want it to be delivered in the way that they want it to. So just because you're working again with a certain community or a group of people doesn't you should still make the effort to understand how they want it to happen.
Yeah. From your experiences, Jamie, you mentioned working in swimming and for Sport England, so that would have been connected into a number of different projects where they're being commissioned by the organisation. What were some of the examples, let's call it good practice, where ED&I, that topic and agenda that we're pushing to try and achieve, let's call it, that's not needed because it's already there. Inclusion, as we termed it before, exists. Have you ever seen that? What does it look like? What are the things that make you go, this is working?
I think the best examples are ones that we don't know about, that are not traditional, that are where stuff just happens organically in communities. And I'm already using organic as like a scientific word. Like, we don't need to talk about stuff like that way, where people just get on and do stuff and don't even think about it as sport or physical activity. They're just out and about, they're just doing stuff. And I think as soon as you start to cross over into that sport, into that club space, to that kind of are you a member? Have you paid for this? Are you booked onto this? We start to turn people off. We start to push people away. The best ways is where it just kind of happens naturally. But I've seen lots of stuff where we almost talk about kind of physical activity by stealth, where you're just trying to working with a knitting group and you say, right, let's just walk around the block together before we start the session, and then slowly people are running 5Ks, they're doing triathlons, they're becoming instructors. Like, I've seen those kind of models quite a lot, but they take time, they take investment, they take trust, and they take respect. And that's the thing that the sports sector is not set up for, because we want people going straight away. We want investment, outcomes. We want to see people active quickly, and all the other stuff that comes with it. So I guess the main lesson I'd say is the most success that I've had, that I've seen that has been sustained, is where there's proper time to build relationships with communities, to build things the way that they want it to be done, and support them to be able to continue to do that, as opposed to helicoptering in an expert and then the funding runs out, they leave, and then the cavern is just left.
How do we square that? You're right. I mean, the informal's maybe the wrong word, but that we know that works, but we know it takes time, and yet we have 3-year funding cycles. I know things are slowly changing, but very slowly. We have structures and rule books and all of the above. I mean, I remember speaking to the person who was responsible for setting up the first walking football, and then it was like all of a sudden the governing body gets involved, and sometimes they're wanting to apply their structures and fences, and it's got to be this type of pitch, and we lose what it's all about. And also it's, women aren't allowed on the pitch the same time as men, so you've put a barrier in there, but why not? It's walking, it doesn't matter, So there's all of this stuff that comes in, and I know things have moved on since then, but how do we square that with there's this, I think it's something within sport as well, this wish to install rules, because sport is rules. How do we get around that?
In a simple phrase, I would say you've got to blow up the system. The system is not made to work this way. It's not made to work with long-term, gentle hand-holding, building relationships, kind of sensible investment. It's built for those that already want to be engaged and can just walk in somewhere because they're able to and feel comfortable to and can just get on with it. But that stems back to this kind of representation point. But this is why it's so difficult for us to work differently, because the system just doesn't work that way. So it takes even more effort, or what seems to be even more effort, to just do what we should have been doing from the very start. Gurmej, do you have any more thoughts?
Yeah, I think just looking at some of the examples again, going back to hockey, that I look at, and again, the most successful sort of outreach programs are the simplest. I'll give an example, and I'll give a shout out to Spencer Hockey Club. I see the work that they're doing. I had a good meeting with the guys who who instigated some work, and they broke it down really simply. They said, all right, hockey is actually an expensive sport. You have to have access to pitches. Hockey pitches aren't cheap. I mean, to put down a hockey pitch, you're looking at about £500,000. But they said, how can we get as many young people who've never looked at hockey as a sport into hockey? They went into schools and they just said, we can use your tarmac that you've got at your school and just put hockey in the purest form: a stick, a ball, a pair of trainers, and they got sticks donated to them, because everyone's got an old stick lying around who plays hockey. Donated to them and gave them to some of these kids and said, let's just have a go, let's just play. And then they didn't say to them all, come and join the hockey club. They kept putting on these sessions, and then they gave invitations to those who they thought showed promise and enthusiasm, and they said come along to our hockey club after that. So they just looked at it in a very, very simple way. They didn't look at it as in, all right, how can we get people to our hockey club? They just thought, how can we get more people moving and put a hockey stick in somebody's hand?
That, I think, I'll just say quickly, I think that is the fundamental difference in how we can kind of make a difference, specifically in this kind of equality, diversity, inclusion space, is that is flipping the way we think about this in terms of what people can do as opposed to what you can't. And it sounds so simple, but when you do that, it makes such a difference. Like Gurmej is just saying, the fundamental point about hockey is getting a stick in someone's hand and getting them moving a ball around. You can do that anywhere. You could do that with anything. And you can break that down in so many ways. And if we did that, if we just took a second and said, right, let's forget about everything we can't do. What is it we can do? What is the positive thing here? What can we actually get on with? I guarantee you'll come up with so many more ideas than you would barriers.
Yeah, indeed. It like you were saying, Jamie, the system that we operate in can be better. Whether it's whenever I look at kind of reworking anything, I always take the approach of start with the blank page, because if you start with a full page, you'll only ever amend 20% of what you're looking at. Whereas if you start blank and use what you know, you might rebuild something that looks very similar to what you already had. But personally, I feel that's the better way around of going at it. And if we keep chipping away at what's already there, you use the phrase blowing up the system, is that part of the outcome or part of the strategic aims of the agenda for the Include Summit? Is that one of the things that you would like to try and make people think about? Do we need to blow things up? Do we need to make some bigger strides?
I think for us, because of how we connected, Gurmej and I, around this kind of point around institutional racism in the sector, it was kind of building off the back of Black Lives Matter, off COVID, off a number of things that we've seen develop over the last couple of years. What we wanted to do with it was for the first time pull together all the different discussions around equality, diversity, inclusion in sport in one place. This is one of the other challenges with the sector, is that quite often for funding to get out the door, it needs to be siloed, and it then encourages more of that siloed way of working. And if we're going to really tackle this stuff, it has to be done strategically. It has to be done collectively, because if we're just kind of burrowing away in our own areas, like, that's brilliant, we're all making a difference, but if we're going to solve it, it has to be done collectively. And that was the vision for the event. And I guess the other side of it is that because we can bring a little bit of independence to that discussion, the event is not linked to kind of politics or bureaucracy. We're in it to have genuine conversations around what we can do to make a difference. And the main thing we've said all the way through the planning of the event, and we'll make really clear during it and kind of in the build up, is that every discussion we'll have will be focused on solutions. So many times we go to different events in this space or other areas, and we sit down, we listen to some amazing speakers, we feel kind of emotionally charged, we give a big round of applause, we have a nice swanky lunch, and you go home and kind of nothing happens. Whereas what we really want to do with this is drive that collective change and encourage people and support them to commit to making a difference and check in on that. And I think bringing this together as a collaboration is something that we're doing here that is different to kind of what's been done before.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we can pop a little graphic up with the magic of doing stuff after the recording. That should appear here, I'm hoping. Gurmej, are there any key details or information about the event that people might want to know about? Dates, times, places?
Yeah, I think so. The dates are the 8th and 9th of March at the at Unique Venues Birmingham, which is an amazing venue right in the centre of Birmingham, really easy to access, very close to the train station. And in terms of just going back to what we want to achieve, we came together, myself and Jamie, and we thought about what is it that we actually want to achieve from this as a very sort of broad objective, and it is to get 1 million young people into sport and healthy living. And we aren't saying right here, right now, how we're going to do that. That's for like everyone to get together, all the great minds that are going to be coming to this event to help us work towards achieving over whether it be 5 or 10 years or whatever it might be. But we want this to be an event which is going to kickstart that initiative. And if we, again, go back to the fundamentals of the grassroots of what this whole debate is all about, if we can have that objective at the back of our mind, thinking about underrepresented kids getting into sport, and I think we're a long way there towards achieving something great here.
And that for us was the obvious way that we solve this issue about representation in the sector. If we can genuinely get 1 million young people involved in sport, underprivileged, underrepresented, that would never usually be involved, over 10, 15, 20 years, that's how we solve this representation issue. And there's no other way to go about solving this on a fundamental level. So yeah, as Gurmej said, there's not a huge amount of detail kind of sitting behind that, but that's intentional. So we can hang discussions off that mission at the event and deliver this collaboratively. We didn't want to come to this with solutions on the table, because that's the point of doing this, is to have those discussions.
No, I really like that, and it is about you're creating the place and the space for that to happen, the opportunity for those discussions to be had. And if we can achieve what it is that you're aiming to, which I think is that event or that opportunity that is a step mark change from the usual suspects coming into a room and making themselves feel good about themselves, and let's talk about things practically. And in the same sense, we're talking about impacting positively on the representation seen in physical activity in sport. I'm crossing my fingers that we'll be there supporting the event as it goes ahead, but we'll see a broader, more proportionate, let's say, representation of the organisations and individuals that come along to it as well, because that's one of those bits that I'm looking forward to. What's the difference in the conversation? Because I've been to the usual sector get-togethers. What's the difference in the conversations that are being had? More challenge, let's say, because that's what's needed. Back to that blowing up the system point.
Well, yeah, and one of the other things we really want to do here is involve communities and young people in the discussion. That's another thing that we don't often do at these kind of sector events. The privileged people in these positions of power, kind of working in these spaces, have these get-togethers, and we make discussions, or we kind of make decisions around different things without people being in the room. So across both days, we've got a number of spaces held for free for young people and for community kind of organisations, leaders to join the event, to be a part of it. So there'll be specific workshops running for young people integrated into the event. So again, that's going to feel so different to that kind of traditional approach in the sector, to have organisations, leaders, budget holders, execs, board members in a space with community projects and young people who are just tearing this stuff up. But I don't think I can think of many other areas where there's been that kind of genuine kind of grassroots to boardroom interaction in one space.
Sounds really, really good. Sounds really, really good and exciting. So I guess I'll draw things to a close for our conversation today. Goes without saying, if you check the links below this video, we'll make sure that there are links available to find out more about the Include Summit, find out how you can get involved and all the key information that's there. It leaves me to thank Jamie and Gurmej for your time and sharing your insights in our conversation today. We'll look forward to seeing you at the Include Summit. And for those watching, if you'd like to learn more about the other episodes within the Move Consulting Network Insights series, check the Move Consulting website, moveconsulting.co.uk/network-insights. Thanks again for your time, everyone. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.